Second. All right, so good morning, everyone. We are so excited to have so many of you with us this morning. I am Shauna Taroso, the Executive Officer of Realtors Association of York and Adams Counties, and I am so pleased that we have a very, very special guest with us this morning, Senator Kristin Phillips-Hill, who represents the 28th Senate District here in York County. She has so graciously agreed to give up part of her beautiful Saturday morning to be with us today and to talk to us about all the things that are happening in the real estate industry. So, Senator, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure, and thank you. Great to be with you all this morning.
Wonderful. And I said to some of the participants earlier today when we planned this, I said, I think Saturday morning would be a good time. It's supposed to be really rainy and people will be inside. They'll be looking for things to do. And lo and behold, we wake up and it is gorgeous outside. So kudos to all of you for giving up the sunshine to join us today. So wanted to start off with just setting the stage and a little bit of the background. So on March 29th, Governor Wolf issued a mandatory shutdown of all non-life sustaining businesses and industries throughout the Commonwealth. And much to our surprise, he deemed that real estate was a non-life sustaining industry. And, you know, I don't know about you, but I have two children. I have a 4- and a 6-year-old, and I'm constantly talking to them about wants versus needs in life. And when I talk to them about needs, there's 3 things I say. You need food, you need clothing, you need shelter. So came as such a big surprise to us that he classified real estate as non-life sustaining. And as we sit here today on May 9th, we are now the last state in the entire country who has not classified real estate as a life-sustaining industry. We're it. And I guess one of our biggest frustrations is we haven't been able to get an answer as to why the administration has said that we're non-life sustaining. So do you have any insight? Can you glean any rationale as to why that decision was made by the administration?
No, and I don't, because unfortunately, this process has been fraught with a lot of confusion, an incredible lack of clarity, and very little transparency. And you are absolutely correct. There are 3 essential things for life: food, clothing, and shelter. And, you know, I'm so grateful because so many of your members have reached out to tell me, you know, heart-wrenching stories of people who are really struggling. And I can remember back in our last move, we sold our home very, very quickly. We were 2 months without a home with 3 young children, you know, basically going from family member to family member. And it's a perilous time. Add on top of that, 3 small children, no home, and then you're in the middle of a pandemic and everything is shut down, and there's no hope that you're going to find the next place that you're going to live. And it's heart-wrenching. I think the story that a local realtor shared that really tugged at my heart the most was a couple, both in the National Guard. One of them is coming here to work at York Hospital, and they have no place to live. And I think we're losing a lot of business in terms of buying homes, and a lot of residents who could contribute greatly to our community to Maryland, because you can still buy a home in Northern Hartford or Baltimore County. Yeah. So I wish that I had an answer. I've spent an inordinate amount of time, you know, trying to find answers for people who are just very confused. But the governor has not been clear, nor has he been transparent about criteria and his decision-making process.
Okay. So since we haven't been able to get the results as realtors that we would like through the governor's administration, one of the routes that we are trying to pursue is a legislative route and having a legislative fix to this issue. So can you provide some background and information about what has been happening with legislation and reopening the real estate business?
Absolutely. So initially, we tried to reopen all business sectors, right? Every business is essential. Every business provides a roof over your head, food on your table, and clothing on your back to someone. So we passed Senate Bill 613, which would have allowed every business, real estate, automotive sales, no matter what you did, if you could comply with the CDC guidelines and were on the CISA list, the list from the federal government, which of course housing and real estate is on that list, you would have been allowed to reopen. And the governor made a decision to veto that legislation. So in the interim, we sent a letter to the Auditor General, DePasquale, and we requested that he audit and investigate the Department of Community and Economic Development to make determination as to how they have administered this shutdown and the waiver process, which we all know has been incredibly fraught with, again, a lot of confusion and a lack of clarity. The Auditor General has said, yes, in fact, he will audit the Department of Community Economic Development, their waiver process, and the governor has indicated he will comply with that audit. I worked with Representative David Rowe. We have sent a letter to Attorney General Barr, U.S. Attorney General Barr, requesting an investigation of the Commonwealth to assure that our constitutional rights have been upheld. We are awaiting a response, but we have indications that they are interested in assisting us in that way. And then about a week and a half ago, Senator Mike Regan from Northern York County, who chairs the Senate Veterans Affairs and Emergency Preparedness Committee, joined with Senator Killian, who chairs the Department or the Senate Committee on Community, Economic, and Recreational Development. They held oversight hearings. They asked for these waivers and information on the decision-making process of the governor's office. Issued the subpoena as a result of the administration not being interested in voluntarily turning over that information. And just 2 days ago, we learned that the governor has decided not to comply with the subpoena. Right now, we're weighing our options for response. And so you understand in the law when an individual does not comply with either a Senate or a House subpoena, they, according to the state law, are to be taken by our House security, the Sergeant at Arms, immediately to Dauphin County Prison. So this has not happened in any of our lifetimes, and so we're very carefully plotting through that. And then, when the governor issued the subpoena on the legislation that looked at responsibly reopening all businesses in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we began a piece by piece by piece approach. And of course, top of the list was reopening real estate. Again, shelter is essential. And I worked with Senator Lisa Boscola, with PAR's legislative affairs person, former state representative who I served with, Alex Charlton, who was originally, well, he still is from Delaware County, and put together legislation, and I've got to get the numbers right, Senate Bill 1135. And basically working with the real estate industry, in consultation with real estate companies all across Pennsylvania, establishing a waiver to allow real estate to operate using mitigation measures as defined by the Centers for Disease Control, to protect not only people who work in real estate, of course, but their clients as well. And, I feel extremely confident that you are professionals, that you will very easily be able to operate using these mitigation efforts and protection for the well-being of all, and really trusting that the industry can devise these standards for you to implement. And so subsequently, good news is that House Bill 2412, that is the House companion legislation that is prime sponsored by Representative Todd Pollenjock, who is from Montgomery County, a newly elected representative who had a distinguished military career as well as a distinguished career in real estate. He's the perfect champion for this legislation. That bill has arrived over in the Senate. So Senator Boscola and I, who co-primed along with Senator Fontana, a Democrat from out west, Senator Scavello, a Republican from the Northeast, and Senator Scott Martin, who also previously was in real estate and a former commissioner in Lancaster, we're all working together to get it done. But Senator Boscola and I have spoken, and we were able to do a Zoom conference call with PAR. I don't know if any of you were on that call as well, but really to her credit, she has said, we need to move the Pollenjock bill. Mm-hmm. So when we had that conversation, the Senate was not supposed to come back for another 2 weeks. We were not supposed to be in session until May 18th. And we felt that it was really, really important that we move that bill and we get that legislation onto the governor's desk. So good news is we've convinced Senate Republican leadership that that's a good idea. So we will be back in session on Monday, and moving this legislation is on the list of priorities. So right now it was referred to Senator Tom Killian's committee, and he has agreed that we will move the legislation. So that's really a quick summary of legislative efforts for real estate. And we're working similar pieces of legislation for everything from dog groomers and home garden centers and barbershops and hair salons and many different businesses that could really be open, protecting public health, but also protecting economic health. So that's where we stand with the legislation.
That's, it's really great news that we're able to convince the Senate to come back early. So, what I'm hearing from the process is right now on Monday, it will need to be voted out of the Senate committee. And Correct. Then on Tuesday, second consideration, and Wednesday, hopefully third consideration, and then back to the House for concurrence. Is that the process we're looking at?
Yeah, and we're hoping, I'm hoping we can get it sooner. The Senate has the ability to move a little quicker. Our rules are such, we have a 6-hour rule. The House has a longer timeline between considerations. So I'm hoping, and of course there's always the possibility, we're hearing that the Senate may take all of these measures for real estate, for dog grooming, for hair salons, for a lot of different industries and consolidate them into one piece of legislation. If that happens, we'll have to move that legislation back to the House for a concurrence vote to get it onto the governor's desk. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to expedite it sooner than that. But yes.
So one of the things that when the House Bill 2412 passed out of the House, we had bipartisan support. So it was 125 to 77. 16 Democrats voted in favor of the legislation.
Right.
But for those who voted against it, one of the pieces that there was their rationale for not voting in favor of it had to deal with, they were concerned about open houses and the congregation of a lot of folks at an open house. And I know Representative Todd Pollenjock did have conversations with the governor's administration that they had those concerns of open houses. So is there plans in the Senate to amend the legislation to deal with this issue, to not allow for open houses, so that we address some of those concerns and maybe get some more Democratic support behind it?
Yeah, I think, the legislation as we drafted it over in the Senate did not allow for open houses. But I mean, certainly, for a real estate professional to be able to take a client to a home to view it, that is going to be able to happen. And I think, anything we can do to join Democrats and Republicans in support of the legislation, the stronger the vote out of the Senate, I think the more likely the legislation will receive the governor's signature. And that's really what we all want, the magic equation of 102 plus 26 plus 1, and to get us, back to work. People want to work and people want to buy homes.
Absolutely. So just that magic equation, there's a lot of discussion about, is the bill veto proof? So can you, educate all of us on how many votes are necessary? If this does, go onto the governor's desk and he decides to veto it, what would have to happen in order for there to be a veto override?
If the governor vetoes it, you need 2/3 of a majority in the House and 2/3 of a majority in the Senate. So we would need approximately 34 votes in the Senate. So, the fact that we have Senator Boscola and Senator Fontana, who I believe Senator Fontana was also a realtor.
Correct. Yep.
That really bodes well for this legislation. And I think Senator Dinniman from Westchester is also a co-sponsor of the legislation. So to see that, it's really good news. And one of the things I've learned with Republicans being in the majority in the legislature, it's, if you can find a partner, a Democrat partner, as a Republican, it helps assure the governor will sign it. And if a Democrat can find a Republican to prime sponsor with, it assures that the General Assembly is more likely to take that legislation up. So I think you've got the perfect mix of legislators. You've got both sides of the aisle covered, and you've got most of the regions across the state covered as well.
Good. So, we're very blessed in York and Adams counties that we have had, so much of the support from our elected officials, our state representatives and our state senators in regards to this piece of legislation. When the bill did pass out of the House, every single state rep in York and Adams County voted in favor of it, with the exception of Representative Carol Hill Evans. Mm-hmm. If the bill, as we're hoping, passes out of the Senate and goes back to the House for concurrence, we're hoping that we can change that vote from a no to a yes. Have you had any reach outs to her office to try to talk to her about this particular piece of legislation, or could we request that you extend that conversation and see if you can have some dialogue around that issue?
Sure, absolutely. And I think it's for some members are not as fiercely independent as other members. Some members have a hard time bucking their leadership.
Sure.
But I think what helps inspire those individuals to buck leadership is for them to hear directly from their constituents. I think it's important. My take on legislating is that I'm in Harrisburg to make sure that the views and the values of the people that I represent infuse everything that happens there in the state capitol. And, I'm there to be their voice and to do their will. And I think that's should be the goal and the objective of every legislator. And so, I think those your members who live in her district, I think will be the most compelling reason for her to change her vote. But I will certainly have that conversation.
I would appreciate that. So moving on to another topic. So right now in Pennsylvania, there was a memorandum that was issued on April 28th that gives some direction on when and how real estate will be able to open up. And it essentially indicates in there that once your region or your county goes to a yellow phase, you will be able to do certain limited in-person real estate activity. Mm-hmm. So we know that 24 of the counties in Pennsylvania went to yellow yesterday, and the governor announced an additional 13 counties were going into yellow starting next Friday, and mostly in the northwestern, north central, and southwestern part of the state.
Right.
York County, much to our credit, there has been this benchmark that has been stated by the governor and by Dr. Rachel Levine that we're looking to hit 50 or less new cases over a 14-day period per 100,000 individuals in your population. Correct. York County, I think 9 days in a row now, we've been below 50. I think yesterday we were around 42 over a 14-day period. So great job to all the York County citizens in practicing social distancing. So, you know, there's lots of folks and individuals who are frustrated that we've hit that benchmark, but yet we're still not yellow. And there hasn't been an announcement as to us going yellow. So any insight or thoughts on when the governor might make that declaration for us?
Yesterday, the entire delegation of York and Adams County, with the exception of the representative from the city of York, wrote to the governor. And Shauna, you are absolutely correct. Based on the numbers that the governor's reporting, and I know there's been a lot of debate as to those numbers, but using those numbers, using the indices and the metrics that the governor has put forward, along with the Secretary of Health. Since our hospitals began testing, the County of York has had 8,286 tests of individuals for COVID-19. Of those tested, 753 individuals tested positive, and we have a population of about 448,000. We have, suffered 13 fatalities. But since April 25th, as you noted, the average was 13.57 cases per day, a total of 190 new cases. So using that metric, right, York County clearly meets the criteria. And, they subsequently, and this is the problem, which is things are constantly changing. They're adjusting their numbers. They're saying, oh no, we've got new criteria. It's like when you teach your child to swim, you say, okay, sweetheart, come and swim to me, right? And you just keep moving backward and backward and backward until they've reached, almost the entire length of the pool. And you're like, wow, look what you've done, right? Yeah. That's what it feels like. It feels like the governor's like, okay, we're there. And oh, no, we have other metrics that you need to meet. So, we've talked with our hospital systems over the past 2 months. We have worked with them to ensure that they have adequate PPE, personal protective equipment, that we have enough bed capacity, that we have enough ventilator capacity, that we have enough testing capacity. And based on that information from both UPMC and York Hospital, we are properly prepared to test and to care for future COVID-19 patients. Now, as of yesterday, received my latest update from UPMC. There are 0 patients with COVID-19 in Hanover Hospital. And there are 2 at UPMC there in the old Memorial Hospital that moved to West Manchester. Yes. And the other key indice that they are looking at is nursing homes. And I will tell you, we held a hearing on the nursing home issue over the river in Lancaster County. Their nursing homes have been devastated with this. And clearly we understand this virus really is lethal for our elderly population. So need to share great kudos to our nursing homes here in York County. They have done an exceptional job flattening the curve and protecting our seniors. And we only have 4 nursing home facilities that have positive cases. We've had 9 COVID-19 positive residents in nursing homes, long-term care facilities, 2 COVID-19 positive employees, and 1 death. I can tell you there are counties in the Commonwealth where they have had hundreds upon hundreds of nursing home deaths. 1 nursing home resident. It's really incredible. So, clearly, based on the governor's and the Department of Health's metrics, what they're asking us to measure, York County should be classified as yellow. So the delegation met. We put together a letter. We respectfully requested that the governor move us, to yellow. We have to ensure that we're protecting lives. Right now, the health system is not overwhelmed here in York County with individuals who are suffering from COVID-19, right? We keep talking about making data-based decisions, that we have to allow science to drive this, and that we need to trust our medical professionals. And that's really what we believe is happening here in York County, and that we can do this. So, based on all that feedback, we believe that we are able to safely, intelligently, responsibly move to yellow. And we've asked for the courtesy of a response. I will tell you that many of our letters go unanswered. Many of our requests go unanswered. We've said, if you want more information from us, we'll all get on a Zoom call. We'll talk to the governor. But I think what's important is that we put together a process, right? And I'm sure a lot of you are parents, it's like incremental discipline, right? You tell your kids, this is my request, right? Okay. And then the next time this happens, there's going to be consequences or things down the road. And I think, what the delegation, when we all met yesterday, is that there is a next step in the works. My hope is that the governor says, you're absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
York County meets the criteria, that we don't have to go down the road of the next step. But we are in talks with the district attorney who issued his guidance, which I had a couple of people say, could you just translate this for me? He's such a lawyer sometimes, Steve Sunday. But, essentially he said, the way that the state has continuously changed what they're supposed to do, it has made it legally fraught with peril for our law enforcement as well as our district attorney to potentially file charges against anyone. So that's a really important thing for us going forward. So I appreciate that he was willing to issue that guidance, as well as talking to our county commissioners. And, I would say that certainly if we do not have a response back soon, we will work with those county elected officials to take that next step.
And so, there was a lot of breaking news yesterday about some other counties. So Dauphin County has declared they're going yellow next Friday, even though the administration has not deemed them as to be able to go yellow next Friday. And so has...
and I will tell you this, Dauphin County and Lebanon County, their numbers, Seth Grove, if you're a numbers geek, Seth Grove is your guy, right? And he loves those numbers. And, trying to make sense of all this, he's been plotting his graphs, and I love it because I've found them to be a more reliable resource in working through these issues. And, last night he put together a chart, an infographic with the map, red and yellow. And you will see York and Adams based on our numbers and using the governor's criteria, the governor's number, York and Adams County meet the criteria. And I will tell you, we work very closely with the Adams County legislators, Representative Dan Mao, Representative Torrin Ecker, and of course, our new senator over in that neck of the woods, Senator Doug Mastriano, who's become a good friend as well. And, we're all on the same page. Our numbers clearly meet the metrics that the governor's put forward, and we really do need to move that way. And there's been this, I think, a false narrative, and that is that everything has to be shut down. And if it's not shut down, everyone is going to die. And conversely, any reopening of the economy is going to kill people. And I think really nothing could be further from the truth. Following the CDC guidelines, sanitizing things, wearing masks, we can very responsibly reopen York County and this Commonwealth. And we have to, because, the next conversation is going to be the budget. Mm-hmm. And it's preliminary numbers are frightening. Our revenues were down 50% in April, right? People aren't earning income. And if they're not earning income, they're not paying income tax. And if they're not earning income, they're not buying homes, buying cars, you know, buying clothes, buying anything. And so if they're not purchasing things, we're not receiving sales tax revenue. And we're looking at a potentially a $4 to $6 billion hole in revenue. And so that makes the budget conversation very, very difficult. And, you know, with every challenge comes an opportunity. I've often thought we need to reset the way we spend money here in the Commonwealth, and not of our own accord, we're going to have the opportunity to do that.
You know, it's so, and along with the revenue discussion is, of course, real estate is such an economic generator in our community.
Absolutely.
16% of the GDP in Pennsylvania is real estate.
Right.
In York County alone, 2019, $2.4 billion, $2.4 billion in real estate sales in York County. And now we all know that with every real estate sale, there is a realty transfer tax.
Absolutely.
2% of that, or 1% of that, goes to the state as a state realty transfer tax. The other 1% is a local realty transfer tax that's shared equally between our municipalities and our school districts. So we're talking about, in York County alone, $24 million in tax revenue paid to our municipalities and school districts. The number of home sales goes down, that tax revenue for our individual municipalities and school districts goes down. They're going to make up for that loss by increasing property taxes, and we're going to have a really bigger problem then too. So
and I will tell you, we are working on measures to freeze local property taxes. It's Representative Barb Gleim from Cumberland County who's really been a great, passionate advocate for that. And of course, you know, there's opposition. I'm sure you know there's no surprise with that. And you know, Shauna, you talked just about what the home sales transaction is. But you know, when you look at what happens when you purchase a new home, right? Probably much to the chagrin of every husband, right?
Absolutely.
You walk in there and it needs to be painted, and you want new carpets, and boy, that linoleum floor looks old. And so, you know, or we need to put on a deck, and we need new furniture, and we need window treatments, and there's a huge economic boom around that home sales. I want new counters in my kitchen, and on and on and on. So I don't know if you've attempted to quantify what that economic activity is, but it's tremendous, I'm sure.
So the National Association of Realtors has indicated that in Pennsylvania, for every home sale transaction, it generates an economic impact of $65,000 per home sale. So wow. You look at York County, we had 6,440 odd home sales in 2019, multiplied by 65,000. You're talking about 400 million in an additional economic impact just from the sale alone. So it's really, really fascinating how big of an impact this sales market has on our overall economy. We're so vitally important in our industry.
Indeed, indeed.
The other thing I just wanted to touch on for all my realtor members out there, and there has been some, you know, there was some push behind when they saw that Lebanon and Dauphin County were declaring themselves yellow.
Right.
It's important to keep in mind that for real estate licensees and for appraisal certificate holders, your license comes from the state. It doesn't come from the county. So even if the individual counties have declared themselves that we're in the yellow phase, that doesn't alleviate the potential that you might be found in violation by the Bureau of Professional and Occupational Affairs, who oversees the Real Estate Commission, for violating the governor's shutdown orders. So just a word of caution there.
And that's a good point. And I will tell you, we also have legislation in the process that would restore any license that is revoked as a measure during this pandemic. And we're hoping to get that to the governor's desk as well. So that is a concern. And that's a concern for so many industries. I had a really heart-wrenching conversation with a family whose loved one had passed,
Yeah.
not being able to have a funeral. And, you know, the biggest problem is that funeral home's license comes from the state. And, you know, I said, you know, you're going to have to talk to the funeral home that, you know, you want to work with about how comfortable they are moving forward with having a big funeral for 40 people in the funeral home, and also insurance issues. You know, we are very concerned with insurance issues.
Yeah.
So.
All right, switching gears just a little bit of another big concern to our industry has been the PUA, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, and the ability for independent contractors and self-employed individuals to file for unemployment compensation for the first time in Pennsylvania. There has been, obviously, you heard a lot of frustration surrounding the delay in that process. And, you know, we're very, very thankful that this past week that they opened up the weekly claims for individuals to file their weekly claims. But yet there is so much confusion surrounding how they file that weekly claim because the real estate industry is so very, very unique. One of the frustrations is there's not a lot of clarity behind what if they do get a commission during this time period. And it could have been a transaction that went under contract prior to March 19th, but because there's typically 30 to 60 days until that property gets to the settlement table, there's a delay in getting that commission check. So our members have had confusion and haven't gotten the answers yet from the Department of Labor and Industry. Is the commission, do you report that when it was earned, when the contract was signed, or is it when it is received after the settlement takes place? So do you have any insight, any information on how they might be able to get that answer?
I will seek to get an answer for that for you. I don't know off the top of my head. And of course, right, you're someone who's not traditionally paid into unemployment compensation, right? So the federal government through the CARES Act provided that money to allow the state to start an unemployment compensation program for people like you, the self-employed, independent contractors, gig workers. And so a lot of questions that we've never really had to address previously. And I will tell you that over 75% of the calls that have come into this office have been with regard to unemployment compensation. Again, tremendous amount of confusion, a lack of clarity, and a system that is really broken. For, you know, it's failing. And I will tell you that since 2013, with the traditional unemployment compensation system, that over $308 million has been invested into the system. And so when I get calls from people who are applying for traditional unemployment compensation, they say, I've been on the phone for 8 hours. Right? I'm like working around my house and I have it on hold on speaker and I can't get anyone. Or I've gone online, I've gotten all the way through, and then the whole system just crashes on me. And it was so bad that as the chair of the Senate Communications and Technology Committee, I went to the chair of the Senate Labor and Industry Committee and said, we have to hold a hearing. We have to hold a hearing. We have to get answers. And, you know, people have gone, it's now 8 weeks without an unemployment compensation check. People's bills are coming due. They need to be able to buy food. You know, I saw John Pavancello's pictures of folks lined up at the old Kmart to get food. I mean, people that never probably ever thought that they would be there, right? So for most people, they pay into this system so that it's there for them in their greatest time of need, right? When they find themselves unemployed on no fault of their own, and here we are, and the system's not working. So what I will tell you is the PUA was up and then it didn't work and it was down, and the people who got in, it was like going to the lunch meat counter over at Giant and you got a ticket. What do I do with this, right? So they had to, you know, get back in line, and so we really pressed him, and he said that next week those checks will start flowing. Of course, for the people who've been able to get through the process,
Right.
8 hours on the phone and the system crashing. And, you know, I will get you an answer. I see Ken. We can't answer your call, and they hung up.
Yeah,
I don't know if it makes you feel better or worse. And it takes me 11 days from, we track things on average. I'm 11 days from inquiry to answer, which is probably faster than most people can get it. But it is huge. I mean, I filed, it's been 35 days. I haven't heard anything. If you are finding yourselves caught in that system, I'm going to get an answer for how to report income back to Shauna, who can push it all out to all of you. But if there are specific issues that you have, and just reach out to my office. If you're in York or Adams County, if you don't know who your state rep is or state senator, I think most realtors do. You guys are pretty government savvy. Reach out to your rep or to your senator, and they will put that inquiry in and get you an answer. I have one person whose sole job for the last 8 weeks has been nothing but unemployment compensation claims, Lisa Miller. And we're all filling in because the volume has just been huge. So, and look, we're going to have to address this going forward. And I will tell you, part of the other concern is, of course, the CARES Act money is going to be there for you. I'm worried that it's going to be enough. And then the other thing is that back in 2012, the regular unemployment compensation system was in debt $3 billion to the federal government. They were charging us an exceptional amount of interest, with labor and business and everyone came to the table and financed it privately, saving $60 million in interest payments. $60 million in interest payments. Oh my gosh, right? So I am worried. Going into this, we were over 180% solvent in the fund. And I am concerned about how those funds are going to hold up for people who are really in great need. So
now I'm going to go over to some of the questions from the attendees. So if you have a question, you can put it in the Q&A. You can put it in the chat feature. I'm going to read some of those at this time. So I have a question here, Kristin. It says, the memo from the Department of State, this is the memo that was issued on April 28th. It says that, when we go yellow, we are only able to take 2 people into a home for a showing at one time.
Okay, so it's a realtor and a couple.
It's 2 people total. So it would be a realtor and one person.
Okay.
And so literally what it means that if you're working, let's say with a husband and wife who are purchasing a home, the realtor would have to take one of them through the property first, and then come back outside, get the other person out of the car, and then the realtor would have to take them through the home, because we don't want individuals going through the home unattended without the licensee going through the property. And we know that PAR has sent a letter in this morning asking for clarification and changes to this. And we're wondering, is there some more support that you could give at the legislative level to at least allow for 3 individuals to go through a home at one time?
Yeah, that's something we could, obviously if there are amendments on 2412, that's something that we could look into doing and see if we can build support for that. I appreciate you bringing that up to me, and I'm going to take a screenshot of that so that I remember it exactly the way you said it. Let's see. Camera. Here we go. This is great. All right. Yeah, I get it. That way you don't have to go in with the wife and then go in with the husband or, the kid or whoever. So no, I get it. And I'm being told that the real estate provisions somewhere on this call is Chloe Mandera, who's my legislative director, and she's saying we're being told that the real estate provisions will be put into Senate Bill 1135. So that's the number that we all have to keep our eyes on. So yeah, thank you, Chloe.
Katie Horn had said, are we arguing the fact that apparently Pennsylvania is the only state considering real estate as a non-life sustaining? Oh, Katie, I think we're sharing that just about everywhere we can. It's
Far
been
and wide, yes. Yes.
And then Katie, I think this is more of a comment that Katie says that when state income is received, it should definitely be when the check is received, because there are times when a contract is written, but it doesn't go to settlement and therefore no income is received, is Katie's thoughts there.
Okay, so it should be when it is received. Yeah, I mean, because really you don't know if that settlement's going to go through, right? They could walk away from the table, something could happen, I get it. So yeah, all right, this is good.
Nolan Peterson is asking, when will House Bill 2412 be voted on?
So we just heard it's going to be Senate Bill 1135, going to have all that real estate language put into it. And I expect it to come out of the Senate this week. It'll come out of committee, then of course has to be reviewed by appropriations, and then we'll go to the floor for a vote.
Teresa Guerreri, she has a question. She said, are property managers allowed to show individuals a property by unlocking the door and letting them in and going in after they leave to sanitize and lock the doors? Teresa, so according to, and the guidance can be a little bit conflicting on the list of what's considered life-sustaining and non-life sustaining. So it does consider that residential leasing is considered a non-life sustaining activity. You would have to do all of that virtually. So, but you are allowed to maintain your facilities, keep up if there's a water break, securing the property, those types of things. But physically showing the property, even if you as a property manager aren't going into the property with the client, the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors has said that's considered an in-person activity, and you wouldn't physically be able to do an in-person showing. You would be able to do a virtual showing of the property, but you wouldn't be able to do an in-person showing of the rental unit. All right, I think there's some over in the other side. Ken Worley had asked, are there ramifications for those agents that are working in their offices that are supposed to be closed? So Ken, the memo that was issued by the Department of State on April 28th, there's a section number 5 in there, and that section clearly states that failure to follow these guidelines strictly could result into sanctions up to and including the suspension of your license. So we do know that the Bureau of Professional and Occupational Affairs is receiving online complaints from individuals who may be doing real estate activities outside of the guidance that has been developed, and probably faster than that department has ever acted in the history. They are moving on these complaints, because I get phone calls every week from agents who've gotten those phone calls from investigators from the Department of BPOA, looking into these claims of realtors who are potentially violating the governor's shutdown orders. So I do know that there have been warnings issued. I don't know if there have been any further sanctions that have been levied outside of the warnings, but that memo has made it very clear that there's potential that your real estate license could be suspended for failure to adherence to that. I don't know if Kristin, you had any more information about that.
I don't think, based on the fact that everything just keeps moving and changing and the ground is shifting, it sounds like the district attorney would have a difficult time finding grounds to prosecute you for that. What you really have to be concerned about is your professional license. Again, we are working to try and put legislation in place to protect that license should something happen and they revoke it. But remember, the governor still has to sign that. And what your insurance, we don't know how insurance is going to cover these things, right? So for example, you go into your office and for whatever reason, you put the coffee pot on and you forget to turn it off and it creates a fire. According to the governor, you're not supposed to be in that building. Therefore, will the insurance company honor that claim? We really don't know. So those would be the two things that, until we can get any of these legislative measures in place, that you need to weigh the pros and cons of your actions. So.
All right, we have another question. Does House Bill 2412 specifically reference residential real estate, or is it all real estate in general? I know this is important to Heather.
No, that's a great question. It's all real estate. So I think we tend to talk about it more in terms of people's homes, because that really is those are the most compelling stories. Hearing about a business that can't get a commercial lease is not, and it doesn't tug on your heartstrings the way, that family of 5 that's living in that long stay hotel, tugs on your heart. Those National Guard members who are going to come and work at the hospital who can't find a home to live here in New York, those tug on your heartstrings. But it covers both residential and commercial. It's just that we don't talk about the commercial as much because it just isn't quite as compelling.
One suggestion here is could it possibly be worded that all members of one household count as one person? So this is a piece when they're going through the property, the request that, obviously all those same folks would be exposed to the same things. So.
Right.
Okay, is the governor making his region county opening decisions only at the end of each week?
It certainly appears to be that way. I think what's so frustrating for us is, and this has been from the very beginning, is, I was out for a nice long walk on that Thursday night, the 29th, when this all came through, and my phone is ringing and I'm trying to ignore it because I'm, walking down Kroll School and it's just so pretty out and it's ringing and ringing. And I pull it out of my pocket and I realize it's Seth Grove and he's called me multiple times in the evening, and I go, uh-oh, I better call him back. And, he's like, hey, have you checked your email box? No. Governor's shutting down the entire state. I'm like, what? Immediately turn around, head back home, hop on my computer, and realize, there was a press release in my email box at 5:00 when the governor was going to shut us all down, or at 4:30 for a 5:00 press conference where every business has to shut down at 8:00. My head was spinning. And, then with this most recent extension of the stay-at-home order, that day, the Secretary of Health had been with the Senate Health and Human Services Committee and the Senate Committee on Aging and Youth for over 2 hours, never said a word. The governor had a press conference with the Attorney General Shapiro, never said a word. Then had the Department of Health briefing later on, never said a word. And at 8:00, we got a press release. We all got the press release at the same time, and it's just, I think this is what has been so frustrating. No conversations. Our leadership talks to the governor about every other day. And I texted the majority leader, I said, did the governor say anything to you about any of this in any of your calls? And over nothing. So, somebody said, well, maybe they had to make that decision quickly. And I'm thinking, you don't make that kind of a decision quickly. Oh my gosh, if you do, I'm really even more scared than I already am scared, right? These things need to be thoughtful. And with every action you take, you have to understand there can be severe consequences, and you have to weigh all these things. It needs to be a thoughtful process. And, you have to be open to public scrutiny and answer questions. Look, the governor's right to know process has been shut down. So even if you apply for a right to know request and you want to understand the decision making and the criteria and everything behind his decision on real estate, which we really don't know, there's no one in his right to know office to answer that request. That's really problematic as well. So, look, I think certainly going forward, when we get on the other side of this, and I do believe we're going to get on the other side of this, there's going to have to be some reckoning. We need to look at Title 35, which is our public health laws, which are very old and antiquated. The last time, they keep referring to Title 35 and these old laws, and this is why we can't release this information. And, that was a law that was written in 1955 for a syphilis outbreak. And it hasn't served us very well in this day and age. So yes.
Okay. Well, I think I know the answer to this question, but do we have any idea why some waivers were granted and some were denied? And is there any investigations ongoing for this?
Well, yeah. So early on, kind of quickly went through this. Yes. So initially, when the governor came and shut everything down, there was absolutely no appeal process. We said, wait a minute, you can't do this. The governor's very empathetic, sympathetic to individuals who are incarcerated. He's put a moratorium on the death penalty here in the Commonwealth. And what I said was, what you have done to businesses is you have put them on death row with absolutely no appeal process in place. And so that was when he conceived of this waiver process. We're going to do a waiver process. Didn't ask us what we thought about it, how we should conduct it, just decided to do it. And, initially we were grateful. I will tell you that over 42,000 businesses applied for waivers. What the governor has released is a list of the businesses that did receive waivers. I think it's under 7,000. And absolutely no criteria, no decisional documents, nothing. So we really don't know. And so that is why we held the oversight hearings, decided to issue the subpoena. The governor has decided he's not going to comply with the subpoena. We are now reviewing what our next step is going to be with regard to that. We requested that the Auditor General audit the Department of Community and Economic Development's waiver process and report back to the General Assembly. The governor has indicated he will comply with the Auditor General's audit of the process, but we do not. And again, the right to know office is closed. So even if you filed a right to know request to receive that information, there is no one in the governor's office to comply with it. Representative Grove has a bill to address that as well. So
another question is, why would the state have the resources and time to have testers call realtors asking to see properties? So we've heard that some members have indicated they believe that they have received test calls from the BPOA trying to pressure them into showing a property. And so any thoughts about that?
Yeah. I will tell you that this kind of behavior has been extremely frustrating. We have a situation, in listening to testimony from our long-term care facilities on Thursday, the Department of Health creates a tattle portal, right? The Department of Health signs a contract with a virtual company to help long-term care facilities without even consulting long-term care facilities. They testified, we feel ignored. We're not getting what we need. We don't need a tattle portal. We don't need a virtual consultant to come in and talk to us. By the way, we have 2,000 long-term care facilities and they've only been to about 70 for this contract. We've spent over $1 million. They feel ignored. They said, we need PPE, we need testing. These gotcha things are not solving our problems. This is a a problem that has been exposed through all of this, right? So thoughtful process that allocates scarce resources to the place where it can make the greatest impact. You know, if we took all those resources and put them into testing and PPE, I think we could have been making a bigger dent in what has been going on here. So, you know, again, yet another thing that when all is said and done, we're going to have those conversations. Thank you for making me aware of that.
Wonderful. And this will be our last question because I promised you an hour and we're at that mark. So is it your county following Beaver, Lebanon, Adams, and Dauphin by moving to yellow phase on May 15th without governor's approval?
I'm sorry, are we going to do that?
Yes, I think that's the question.
I mean, certainly look, I think that is the trajectory that we're on, the path that we're on. We issued the letter yesterday. Again, the entire delegation signed that letter and laid out, you know, the criteria which we had discussed clearly, based on the governor's metrics and indices, based on the governor's data. We clearly meet the criteria. And if you even include those things additionally, you know, with regard to our care facilities, do we have enough PPE? Do we have enough testing? What is our bed capacity? What is our ventilator capacity? Hanover Hospital has no patients with COVID-19 currently. UPMC in West Manchester Township has 2. I don't know what the latest number is at York Hospital, but we clearly meet those indices. And, you know, we are being told that, you know, we're almost there, and we need to move there. And we're working through that process. And I believe that's the next step.
Great. And I will just say it again. I know I said it earlier, but I will reiterate that for licensees, even if York and Adams counties would declare that they're yellow, but the state hasn't issued us as yellow, your real estate license and your appraisal certificate, it comes from the state, not the counties. And there's potential that if you violate the shutdown orders at the state level, you could be subject to those sanctions up to and including the suspension of your license. So please keep that in mind, even if those other steps are taken.
That's very good and sound advice, Shauna. So again, we're working to put those protections into law, but of course, again, back to the magic equation of 102 plus 26 plus 1, and of course, needing a 2/3 vote in either chamber in both chambers to override the veto. That would be essential. So yes. Thank you to everyone. So nice to spend this morning with you. I see most realtors on the rail trail when I try to mix up my walks and keep things interesting. But that's usually where I bump into most realtors. And you know, I want you to go back to work if you want to be back to work. And that's what we're working toward.
Well, we truly appreciate all of your efforts. And as I think is clear to anyone who participated in this panel today, just how hard our elected officials are working on behalf of this industry to get you back into business. And so from the bottom of our hearts, thank you. We truly
thank you. Thank you. You were all wonderful. And I learned a lot today, and I have some great little tidbits to fight the battle in Harrisburg. So thank you.
All right.
Take care.
Have a blessed day, everyone. Take care.
As well.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.